You should not be here." The words cut through the noise of the bustling kitchen like a blade, sharp and cold. Ilara froze, her hands still submerged in the scalding water where she had been scrubbing the heavy iron pots used for the evening feast. Steam rose around her face, dampening the strands of dark hair that had escaped from the tight braid she kept hidden beneath a faded cloth. She did not turn around. She had learned long ago that the best response to attention was no response at all. Invisibility was survival. Silence was safety. "I said, you should not be here." The voice came again, closer now, and this time she recognized the sharp tone of Mistress Haldren, the head of palace staff who ruled the servant quarters with an iron fist and a tongue that could strip flesh from bone. Ilara slowly withdrew her reddened hands from the water, wiping them on the stained apron that hung loose on her thin frame. She kept her eyes downcast, her posture submissive, everything about her body language designed to communicate that she was nothing. No one. Not worth the effort of anger or attention. "The grand moon ritual begins within the hour," Mistress Haldren continued, her footsteps clicking against the stone floor as she approached. "All servants are to remain in the lower quarters during the ceremony. No exceptions, especially not for kitchen maids who think they can wander where they please." Ilara finally allowed herself to look up, just enough to meet the older woman's gaze without challenge. "I was told to finish the pots before the final bell, mistress. I was only following orders." The excuse was weak, and they both knew it. But it was enough. Mistress Haldren's eyes narrowed, her thin lips pressing into a line of displeasure. But after a long moment, she simply waved a dismissive hand. "Finish quickly and get below. If any of the nobles see you lurking about during the ritual, it will be my head as well as yours." She turned sharply and departed, leaving Ilara alone once more in the sweltering heat of the kitchen. The grand moon ritual. 5 years she had been here. 5 years of keeping her head down and her identity buried, and never once had she been foolish enough to go anywhere near the ceremonial halls during one of the pack's sacred gatherings. Tonight would be no different. Ilara returned to her work, her movements automatic, her mind already drifting to the small, windowless room in the servants' quarters, where she would spend the evening as she always did, alone with her thoughts and the ghosts of a past she could never fully escape. She did not know that everything was about to change. She did not know that the Alpha King had returned from war. She did not know that destiny had already caught her scent. The final bell rang through the palace, its deep tone reverberating through stone and bone alike. Ilara dried her hands one last time and made her way through the narrow corridors that connected the working areas of the palace to the servants' quarters. The passages were emptier than usual, most of the staff already secured in the lower levels as commanded. The Grand Moon ritual was not just any ceremony. It was the night when the Alpha King would officially take his place on the throne after years of leading the kingdom's forces in territorial wars against the rogue packs of the northern wastes. It was also the night when his betrothal to Lady Seraphina would be announced before the assembled nobility and pack. Elders, a political marriage, an alliance that would unite the two most powerful families in the realm and ensure peace for generations to come. Or so the official proclamations claimed. Ilara knew better than most that peace was a luxury purchased with blood and sacrifice, and that the smiles worn during ceremonies often hid daggers prepared for backs. She was nearly to the servants' stairwell when she heard it. Music, the haunting melody of ceremonial drums, and the ethereal voices of the ritual singers drifted through the walls, calling to something deep inside her that she had spent 5 years trying to silence. Her wolf, the part of herself that she kept locked away behind walls of will and desperation. Most wolves manifested during adolescence, their first shift a rite of passage celebrated by family and pack. Ilara's wolf had never emerged. Or rather, she had been forced to keep it suppressed, buried so deep that sometimes she wondered if it had died along with her parents, that terrible night when everything had been taken from her. But tonight, for reasons she could not explain, she felt it stirring, a restlessness beneath her skin, a heat in her blood that had nothing to do with the kitchen fires. The pull was almost physical, drawing her toward the sound of the ceremony rather than away from it. "Do not be a fool," she whispered to herself, her fingers curling into fists at her sides. "You have survived this long by being smart, by being invisible. Do not throw it away now." But even as she spoke the words, her feet were carrying her forward, away from the safety of the servants' quarters, and toward the grand ceremonial hall. She told herself she would only look, only steal a glimpse through one of the servants' observation alcoves that lined the upper galleries. She told herself she could resist the pull, that she was still in control. She was wrong on both counts. The ceremonial hall was magnificent in a way that stole breath and reason. Ilara had cleaned these halls countless times in the early morning hours before the nobility awoke. But she had never seen them like this. Alive with firelight and moonlight streaming through the massive stained glass windows that depicted the first shift, the moment when the moon goddess had blessed the first humans with her gift and created the wolf packs. Hundreds of nobles filled the space below, all dressed in their finest, their jewelry catching the light as they moved. At the far end of the hall, elevated on a dais of white marble, stood the throne. And before the throne, surrounded by the pack elders in their ceremonial robes, stood a man who could only be the Alpha King. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. She had never seen him before. King Demon had left for the wars before she had arrived at the palace, and all she knew of him were the stories whispered by other servants. They said he was ruthless in battle, that he had personally killed over 100 rogues. They said his wolf was massive, black as midnight with eyes that glowed like molten gold. They said he had never lost a fight, never shown mercy to his enemies, never allowed emotion to cloud his judgment. Looking at him now, Ilara believed every word. He stood well over 6 feet tall, his body clearly honed by years of combat, his broad shoulders and muscled frame evident even beneath the formal ceremonial attire he wore. His hair was dark, almost black, cut short in a military style that emphasized the sharp angles of his face, but it was his eyes that truly captured attention. Even from her hidden vantage point in the shadows of the upper gallery, she could see them scanning the crowd below with an intensity that seemed to weigh and measure every person present. These were not the eyes of a king who had been raised in luxury and politics. These were the eyes of a warrior who had earned his crown in blood and strategy, who trusted no one and expected betrayal from every corner. As she watched, a woman stepped forward from the crowd, Lady Serafina. Ilara recognized her from the countless times she had served meals to the noble family's private dining chambers. Serafina was beautiful in the way that great works of art were beautiful, perfect, and cold, and untouchable. Her gown was silver and white, cut to emphasize her elegant figure, and her golden hair was arranged in an elaborate style woven with moonstones and diamonds. She moved with the confidence of someone who had never been denied anything in her life, who knew without doubt that she was destined for greatness. The crowd quieted as she approached the dais, and Ilara watched as one of the elders began speaking the formal words of the betrothal ceremony. This was it, the moment that would seal the political alliance and secure King Demon's position on the throne. But then something impossible happened. King Demon's eyes lifted from Lady Serafina's face. His gaze swept across the assembled nobles, moving higher, searching for something or someone in the shadows above. And then his eyes locked directly onto Ilara's hiding place. The world stopped. Everything stopped. Time, breath, heartbeat, thought. The connection was instantaneous and absolute. A recognition that went beyond sight or sound, or any physical sense. It was as if every cell in her body suddenly became aware of every cell in his, as if invisible threads had been woven between them in the space of a single heartbeat, binding them together in a way that could never be undone. Mate bond. The words rose unbidden in her mind, carried on instinct older than memory. The sacred connection that the moon goddess herself created between true mates, the bond that transcended pack politics and social hierarchy, and even death itself. No, this could not be happening. Not to her, not now. Not with him. Ilara stumbled backward, her hand flying to her chest where her heart hammered against her ribs, as if trying to break free. The wolf inside, her, the one she had kept silent and suppressed for 5 years, suddenly surged forward with a force that nearly drove her to her knees. It wanted out. It wanted to shift, to run down to the ceremonial hall, to claim what was theirs. Every instinct screamed at her to go to him, to let the bond complete itself, to surrender to the inevitable. But Ilara had not survived 5 years in hiding by surrendering to anything. She turned and ran. The corridors blurred past her as she fled, her feet carrying her through passages she knew by heart, from years of navigating them in darkness. Behind her, she heard shouts. The sudden commotion of the ceremony disrupted, but she did not stop, did not slow, did not allow herself to think about what she had just done, or what it meant. She had to get away, had to hide, had to bury this connection before it destroyed everything she had built, every wall she had constructed between herself and the world that had taken everything from her. She burst through a side door and found herself in one of the palace gardens. The night air cool against her flushed skin. The full moon hung overhead, massive and silver, and its light seemed to pour into her like liquid fire. The wolf inside her howled, a sound of longing and fury and desperation that she felt in her bones, even though no sound escaped her lips. "Please," she whispered to the empty garden, to the moon above, to whatever gods or fates might be listening. "Please, just let me disappear. Let me be invisible again. Let me be safe." But safety, she was about to learn, was an illusion she could no longer afford. "I would not have believed it if I had not seen it with my own eyes." The voice came from behind her, deep and commanding, carrying the unmistakable weight of authority and power. Ilara spun around to find King Demon standing at the garden entrance, his ceremonial robes abandoned, his shirt partially unlaced as if he had torn at it while running. His chest rose and fell with exertion, and his eyes, those impossibly intense eyes, were fixed on her with a focus that made her feel stripped bare despite being fully clothed. "You ran from me," he said, and there was something almost like wonder in his voice beneath the steel. "My mate, my true mate, and you ran from me as if I were something to fear." Ilara forced herself to stand straight, to meet his gaze even though everything in her screamed to submit, to lower her eyes, to acknowledge the massive difference in their status and power. "You are mistaken," she said, and was shocked at how steady her voice sounded. "I am no one. A kitchen maid. There has been an error." He moved toward her then, each step deliberate and predatory, closing the distance between them with the confidence of someone who had never been denied anything he truly wanted. "An error," he repeated, and now there was something dark in his tone, something dangerous. "The mate bond is an error. The pull that nearly drove me from my own betrothal ceremony, that made my wolf claw at my control until I thought I would shift in the middle of the ritual itself. That is an error." He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell the scent of him, pine and smoke and something wild that made her wolf keen with need. "Tell me your name," he commanded, and it was a command, the voice of an alpha king who expected immediate obedience. For a moment, Ilara considered lying, considered giving him a false name and maintaining the fiction that she was truly just a simple servant with no past, no identity beyond scrubbing pots and staying invisible. But something in his eyes stopped her. This man had spent years in war. He knew when people lied. He knew when they were hiding something. And more than that, the bond between them hummed with a need for truth, for authenticity, for the barriers to come down, even though every survival instinct she possessed demanded they stay firmly in place. "Ilara," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Ilara." He breathed it like a prayer, like a curse, like a revelation. "Ilara." Then, more gently than she would have thought possible from a man with his reputation, he reached out and touched her face, his fingers rough with calluses, but his touch impossibly tender. The moment his skin made contact with hers, the bond flared between them like lightning striking the earth, and they both gasped at the intensity of it. Ilara saw his eyes flash gold, his wolf rising to the surface, and felt her own wolf surge forward in response, demanding to be acknowledged, demanding to be set free after years of captivity. "You feel it," Demon said, and it was not a question. "You feel what I feel. This is real, Ilara. This is the bond that legends are written about, the connection that most wolves search their entire lives for and never find. And you would throw it away. You would run from it. From me." Why? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with everything she could not say, with all the secrets she had to keep buried if she wanted to survive. How could she tell him that she was not who she appeared to be, that the name Ilara was real but incomplete, that her full identity was one that would shake the foundations of the political structures he had just fought a war to stabilize? That she was Ilara Shadowmoon, last surviving heir of a clan that had been destroyed in a single night of betrayal and bloodshed, a clan whose lands and resources had been divided among the very nobles currently celebrating in his ceremonial hall? "I cannot do this," she said instead, pulling away from his touch even though it felt like tearing away part of her own soul. "You have your duty, your betrothal. The peace of the kingdom depends on your alliance with Lady Seraphina's family. I will not be the reason that falls apart. I will not be responsible for more war, more death." Something shifted in his expression, a hardness settling over his features like a mask sliding into place. "So you would sacrifice our bond, our happiness, for politics. The way he said the word made it sound like the vilest curse. I would sacrifice anything, Alara said, and meant it, to avoid being the cause of suffering. I have seen enough death. I have lost enough. I will not add to the tally by being selfish. She turned to leave, to disappear back into the shadows where she belonged. But his hand shot out and caught her wrist, holding her in place with a grip that was firm but not painful. You think you can just walk away, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble that she felt in her chest. You think the bond will simply fade if you ignore it. You are wrong, Alara. The mate bond does not release its hold. It will burn in your blood every day and night. It will make you ache. It will drive you slowly mad with need and longing. Is that really what you want? A lifetime of running from the one thing that could make you whole? She looked back at him over her shoulder, saw the fierce determination in his eyes, the set of his jaw that spoke of a man who had never learned to accept defeat. I have been running for 5 years, Your Majesty, she said quietly. I am very good at it by now. Please, let me go. For a long moment he held her there, held her gaze, and she could see the war raging behind his eyes, the battle between his wolf and his human reason, between his desires and his duties. Then slowly, his fingers loosened, and he released her wrist. Go then, he said, and his voice was hollow, emptied of emotion. But know this, Alara. I will find out who you really are. I will discover why a kitchen maid carries herself like nobility, and why her scent is laced with ancient bloodlines. And when I do, when all your secrets are laid bare, there will be no more running, no more hiding. You will face me. You will face this bond, and you will make a real choice, not one born of fear. She did not answer, could not answer. She simply turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone in the moonlit garden, and prayed to gods she no longer believed in, that he would never make good on his promise. If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. The servants' quarters were in chaos when Alara finally made it back. Word had already spread about the disruption at the ceremony, about how the Alpha King had suddenly abandoned his own betrothal ritual and disappeared into the night. The other servants huddled in small groups, whispering theories and speculation, their voices rising and falling in waves of excitement and concern. Alara slipped past them all, keeping to the shadows as she always did, and made her way to the tiny room she called home. It was barely large enough for the narrow cot and small trunk that held all her possessions, but it was hers. And, more importantly, it had a door that locked from the inside. She bolted the door and collapsed onto the cot, her entire body shaking with the aftermath of what had just happened. The mate bond still hummed beneath her skin, a constant awareness of Demon's location somewhere in the palace above. A pull that wanted her to go to him, to complete what had been started in that moment of recognition. Her wolf paced restlessly inside her mind, no longer content to remain dormant, demanding to be acknowledged after years of suppression. We cannot, Alara whispered to the darkness, to herself, to the wolf that was part of her, whether she wanted to acknowledge it or not. We cannot claim him. Do you not understand what that would mean? The questions it would raise? The investigations that would follow? Images flashed through her mind, unbidden and unwelcome. Her parents' bodies lying in the ruins of their home, their throats torn out by claws that should have been protecting them rather than destroying them. The smell of smoke and blood, the sounds of screaming as the entire Shadow Moon compound burned, and above it all, the faces of those responsible, nobles who had smiled and promised loyalty while planning betrayal. She had been 15 years old. Her parents had sent her away to visit a distant cousin just days before the attack, a decision that had saved her life, but haunted her with survivor's guilt. By the time she had learned what happened and tried to return, there was nothing left but ashes and accusations. The official story was that her father, Alpha of the Shadow Moon clan, had been planning a rebellion against the crown, that he had been stockpiling weapons and forming alliances with rogue packs, that the attack on his compound had been a justified action to prevent civil war. It was all lies. Every word of it, but lies told by powerful nobles and backed by the previous Alpha King became truth, became history, became the reason why the Shadow Moon name was now synonymous with traitor, and why any surviving members of the clan would be executed on sight. So Alara had done the only thing she could do. She had erased herself, changed her appearance, dyed her distinctive silver hair to mundane brown, learned to suppress her scent and her wolf so completely that she registered as barely more than human. She had made herself into no one, nothing. A ghost moving through the world with no past and no future. Only the eternal present of survival, and it had worked. For 5 years it had worked, until tonight. Until one moment of eye contact with a man whose very existence threatened to unravel every careful thread of safety she had woven around herself. A sudden knock on the door made her jolt upright, her heart hammering. "Ilara, it is Mara. Let me in." Mara was another kitchen maid, one of the few people in the palace who had shown Ilara any kindness when she had first arrived 5 years ago. They were not exactly friends. Ilara had learned to keep everyone at arm's length, but there was a mutual respect between them. Ilara opened the door a crack and found Mara standing in the hallway, her round face flushed with excitement and worry. "What is it?" Ilara asked, trying to sound normal, as if her entire world had not just been turned inside out. "What is it?" Mara pushed past her into the room, closing the door behind her. "What is it? The entire palace is talking about how the Alpha King went mad during his own betrothal ceremony. Some say he shifted partially and nearly attacked Lady Serafina. Others say he sensed a threat and was hunting an intruder. And you are asking me, what is it?" Ilara sat back down on the cot, her legs suddenly too weak to support her. "I do not see what that has to do with me." Mara gave her a long, searching look. "You disappeared at the same time. I noticed because you were supposed to help me prepare the midnight refreshments for the after-ceremony celebration, but you never showed up. Where were you, Ilara?" The lie came easily, practiced from years of necessity. "I felt unwell. The heat in the kitchen. I came back here to rest." Mara's eyes narrowed. She was not convinced. Ilara could see that clearly. But after a moment, she simply sighed and sat down next to her on the narrow cot. "Be careful," she said quietly. "Whatever is happening, whoever you really are, be careful. There are people in this palace who enjoy destroying others, who look for any excuse to tear down anyone who seems different or interesting. You have stayed safe by being invisible. But after tonight, I have a feeling that is going to be much harder." The words sent a chill down Ilara's spine, because they confirmed what she already knew. Everything had changed tonight. The careful balance she had maintained was broken, and there was no putting it back together. "Thank you for the warning," Ilara said softly. "I will be careful." Mara stood, then paused at the door. The king never completed the betrothal ceremony. He left before the final vows were spoken. Lady Serafina was humiliated in front of everyone. Her father is furious, threatening to withdraw his support from the crown. People are saying it is a disaster, that the kingdom might collapse before it has even properly rebuilt from the war. She opened the door, then looked back one more time. "I do not know what happened tonight, Ilara, but I hope it was worth it." Then she was gone, leaving Ilara alone with her thoughts and the terrible knowledge that she had not just disrupted her own life tonight. She had potentially disrupted the entire kingdom. Sleep did not come. How could it, with the mate bond singing in her veins, and her wolf clawing at her control, and the weight of potential catastrophe pressing down on her chest? Ilara lay on the cot and stared at the ceiling and tried to figure out what she was supposed to do now. Running was not an option. Not really. She had no money, no resources, no safe place to go. The world beyond the palace was full of packs and territories, and a lone wolf without protection was vulnerable to attack or forced claiming by any alpha who decided she was worth the trouble. She could try to go to ground in one of the human cities, but humans had their own problems with wolves, their own prejudices and fears, and besides, the mate bond would make it impossible to truly leave. Demon had been right about that. The connection would burn in her blood wherever she went, calling her back to him, making every day without him a special kind of torture. So running was out, which left staying. But how could she stay now? How could she continue being invisible when the Alpha King himself had looked at her with recognition, with possession, with the kind of intensity that left marks on the soul? The answer came to her as dawn light began to creep through the tiny window high on the wall. She would have to make herself useful in a different way. She would have to become someone the demon needed for reasons beyond the mate bond. Someone whose value to the kingdom was greater than the political cost of acknowledging her existence. She would have to prove herself indispensable. It was a desperate plan. A dangerous plan, but it was the only plan she had. The palace was different in the morning light. Ilara could feel the tension in the air as she made her way through the corridors toward the kitchens. Servants whispered in corners, their faces tight with worry. Guards stood at attention with hands on weapons, as if expecting attack at any moment. And everywhere she looked, she saw evidence of heightened security, of a kingdom on edge. She had just entered the kitchens when Mistress Haldren's hand clamped down on her shoulder like a vice. "You," the older woman hissed. "My office. Now." The office was a cramped space off the main kitchen area, barely large enough for a desk and 2 chairs. Mistress Haldren shut the door with enough force to rattle the hinges, then rounded on Alara with fury blazing in her eyes. "I do not know what you did last night, but you have brought trouble to my staff, and I will not tolerate it. The king's guards came through here an hour ago. They were asking about you, about a brown-haired kitchen maid who might have been in the upper galleries during the ceremony. I told them I had no such person on my staff, that all my workers were accounted for in the servants' quarters as ordered. I lied for you, girl. Do you understand? I lied to the Alpha King's personal guards. If they discover that, I could lose my position. I could lose my life." Alara's mouth went dry. She had not expected them to move so quickly, had not thought that Demon would immediately set his guards to searching for her. "I am sorry," she said, and meant it. "I never intended to cause trouble for you or anyone else. I needed. There was. I do not care about your excuses." Mistress Haldren cut her off sharply. "I care about solutions. You are going to leave this palace. Today, I will give you a small amount of money and a letter of reference under a different name. You will go to the southern territories where they are always looking for workers, and where no one will ask too many questions. And you will never speak of this place or this night to anyone. That is the only way this ends without more people getting hurt. Do you understand me?" It was a generous offer, Alara realized. More generous than she had any right to expect. Mistress Haldren was risking herself to give Alara a chance at a new life, at continuing the pattern of running and hiding that had kept her alive this long. She should take it. She should thank the woman and accept the money and the letter and disappear into obscurity before things got worse. But even as the thought formed, she felt the mate bond pulse inside her chest, felt her wolf snarl at the very idea of putting more distance between herself and Demon, and beneath the supernatural pull and the animal instinct, she felt something else. Anger. Tired, bone-deep anger at always being the one who had to run, who had to hide, who had to make herself smaller and quieter, and less in order to survive in a world that had taken everything from her. "No," she heard herself say, and was shocked at the firmness in her own voice. "No, I will not leave." Mistress Haldren's face went from red to purple. "Excuse me? You dare to refuse?" "I am not trying to be difficult," Alara said quickly, "and I truly am grateful for what you are offering. But running will not solve this. The king will keep searching. He will turn the palace inside out until he finds me, and when he does, if I have fled, it will only confirm whatever suspicions he has. It will make things worse, not better." "Then what exactly do you propose?" Mistress Haldren demanded. "That you simply wait here to be discovered? That you allow the guards to drag you before the king and gods know what happens? Then?" Alara took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I propose that I stop hiding. That I go to the king myself, on my own terms, before he finds me on his, and that I tell him the truth. Some of it, at least, the truth." The words felt strange in her mouth. She had been lying for so long, becoming so practiced at deception, that the idea of voluntarily revealing anything real felt like stepping off a cliff into empty air. But she could see now that the time for hiding was over. The mate bond had seen to that. Demon would never stop searching for her, and eventually someone would talk. Someone would remember seeing her in the galleries. Someone would piece together enough information to identify her. Better to control the narrative while she still could. Mistress Haldren stared at her for a long moment, then slowly sank into the chair behind her desk. "You are either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, girl. I have not decided which." "Perhaps both," Alara admitted. "But it is the only path I can see forward." The older woman rubbed her temples as if fighting off a headache. "Very well. If you are determined to do this, at least do it properly. Clean yourself up. Find some decent clothes, not these rags you wear in the kitchen. And for the love of the moon goddess, try not to look like you are walking to your execution. Kings respect strength, even when they disagree with it." She stood and moved to a small cabinet in the corner, pulling out a simple but well-made dress in deep blue. "This was mine when I was younger and had not yet given up on looking presentable. It should fit you well enough. Take it. And take this advice as well. Whatever truth you plan to tell him, Make sure it is enough to satisfy his curiosity, but not so much that it destroys you. Some secrets are meant to stay buried, Ilara. Even from one's mate. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below. An hour later, Ilara stood before the massive doors that led to the Alpha King's private study. She had bathed, dressed in the borrowed blue gown that actually fit her surprisingly well, and done her best to arrange her hair in a style that was presentable if not elaborate. She looked, she realized with some surprise, like a person rather than a ghost, like someone who might have a name and a history and a future. The guards flanking the doors watched her approach with expressions that were carefully neutral, but she could sense their tension, their readiness to act if she proved to be a threat. "I am here to see the king," she said, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "He has been searching for me. My name is Ilara." One of the guard's eyes widened slightly in recognition. He must have been part of the search party that morning. "Wait here," he commanded, then slipped inside the study. The minutes dragged past like hours. Ilara focused on her breathing, on maintaining her composure, on not letting her fear or her wolf show on her face. Whatever happened in the next few minutes would determine the course of the rest of her life. She had to be strong, had to be smart, had to remember that she was not just some powerless kitchen maid but the daughter of an alpha, trained from birth to hold her own in a world of power and politics, even if she had spent the last 5 years pretending otherwise. The door opened and the guard gestured for her to enter. "The king will see you now." The study was everything she had expected and nothing she had imagined. Large but not ostentatious, filled with books and maps and the tools of governance rather than displays of wealth. A massive desk dominated one side of the room, covered in documents and correspondence. And behind that desk, standing with his back to her as he gazed out a window at the palace grounds below, was Demon. He did not turn immediately, and the silence stretched between them, heavy with everything that had been said and left unsaid in the garden the night before. Finally, without looking at her, he spoke. "I did not expect you to come to me. I thought I would have to hunt you down like prey." "I am not prey," Ilara said quietly. "And I am not a coward, despite what you might think after last night. I came because I owe you some explanations, and because I realized that running would only make things worse." He turned then, and the impact of his full attention was like being struck by lightning. In the daylight, dressed in simple dark clothing, rather than ceremonial robes, he was somehow even more imposing than he had been in the moonlit garden. His eyes tracked over her, taking in every detail of her appearance, and she saw surprise flicker across his face. "You look different," he said. "The kitchen grime is gone. So is some of the weariness you wore like armor. I can see you more clearly now. See what you have been hiding." He moved around the desk, approaching her with the same predatory grace he had shown in the garden, and Ilara fought the urge to step back, to put distance between them. The mate bond flared as he got closer, warming her blood, making her skin tingle with awareness. "Tell me who you are," Demon said, stopping just an arm's length away. "Your full name, your clan, why a woman with your bearing and your blood works in the kitchens of my palace as if she is no one." This was it, the moment of truth, or at least a carefully edited version of it. Ilara met his gaze and did not look away. "My full name is Ilara Thorn," she said, using her mother's family name rather than Shadow Moon. "I was born to a minor noble family in the Western Territories. My parents died when I was 15. There was no one to take me in, no inheritance to claim. I survived the only way I could, by finding work wherever I could get it. I came to the capital 5 years ago, and found a position in the palace kitchens. That is the truth, Your Majesty. I am no one special, no one important, just someone trying to survive." It was not entirely a lie. Her mother had been born a Thorn before marrying into the Shadow Moon clan, and everything she had said about being orphaned and alone was true, even if the circumstances were drastically different from what she had implied. Demon studied her face, his expression unreadable. "You are lying," he said flatly. "Not about everything, I think, but about enough. I can smell noble blood on you, Ilara Thorn, and it is not from some minor Western family. It is ancient, powerful, the kind of bloodline that should be celebrated and protected, not hidden in kitchen corners." He reached out and took her hand, and the touch sent sparks racing up her arm. "I could force the truth from you. I could use my authority as king to investigate every detail of your past until I uncover whatever you are hiding. But I am going to make you an offer instead. A bargain." Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs. "What kind of bargain?" "You want to survive, to be safe. I can give you that. But I need something in return. I need time to untangle the political mess, created when I walked away from my betrothal ceremony. Lady Seraphina's father controls half the military resources of the southern provinces. If I simply cast her aside for a kitchen maid, even one who is my true mate, he will rebel. There will be civil war. Everything I fought for, all the lives lost in the northern campaigns, will be for nothing. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to something almost intimate. So, here's my proposal. You remain at the palace, but not as a servant. I will install you in the noble quarters as a guest, give you protection and resources. In exchange, you help me solve this political crisis. You are clearly more educated and intelligent than you have been pretending to be. Use that intelligence to help me find a way to honor the mate bond without destroying the kingdom. Do this, and I promise you will have safety, legitimacy, a place in this world where you can stop running. Refuse, and I will have no choice but to investigate your past thoroughly. And I suspect you and I both know that investigation would not end well for you. It was brilliant, Ilara had to admit. He was offering her protection in exchange for cooperation, dangling safety in front of her, while also making it clear that refusal would mean exposure. It was both carrot and stick, delivered with the smooth confidence of a leader who was used to getting what he wanted. And the truly maddening part was that she wanted to accept, wanted to stop running, stop hiding, stop being alone against a world that had shown her nothing but cruelty for 5 years. But accepting meant staying close to him, meant allowing the mate bond to grow stronger every day, meant risking everything if her true identity was ever uncovered. Because the daughter of a condemned traitor would be far more than a political inconvenience. She would be an existential threat to his reign. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. You are asking me to become a political tool, she said carefully, to help you manage your relationships with the nobility while we navigate the situation we find ourselves in. And in exchange, you offer me safety and legitimacy. But what happens when this crisis is resolved, Your Majesty? What happens when you have figured out how to appease Lady Seraphina's father and secure your throne? Where do I fit in your world then? His eyes flashed gold, his wolf rising briefly to the surface before he controlled it. When this crisis is resolved, Ilara, you will be exactly where the mate bond demands you be, by my side. As my queen, do you really think I would go through all of this, risk all of this, for anything less than forever? The word hung between them, huge and impossible, and terrifying in its implications. Forever, with a man who could destroy her with a single investigation. With an alpha king whose throne sat on foundations, built partly from the ruins of her father's clan. With her true mate, the one person in all the world that her soul recognized as its other half. I need time to think, she heard herself say. Demon's jaw tightened. I am offering you everything, and you need time to think. You are offering me a gilded cage and calling it freedom, Ilara countered, finding her courage somewhere in the depths of her fear. You are asking me to trust you, to reveal myself to you, to build a life that depends entirely on your continued protection and favor. Forgive me if I need more than 5 minutes to decide whether to accept that offer. For a moment she thought he would argue, would use his authority or the mate bond itself to force her compliance. But instead, something shifted in his expression, a grudging respect flickering across his features. You have until tonight, he said. I am hosting a meeting with the pack elders to discuss the situation with Lady Seraphina's family. You will attend that meeting. If you come as my acknowledged guest, dressed appropriately and introduced properly, I will take that as your acceptance of my proposal. If you do not appear, I will understand that as refusal, and I will begin my investigation immediately. Those are your options, Ilara. Choose wisely. He released her hand and stepped back, creating physical distance that did nothing to diminish the pull between them. One of my guards will escort you to guest quarters where you can rest and prepare. You are free to move about the palace, but you are not free to leave it. Not until you have given me your answer. It was a dismissal, clear and absolute. Ilara curtsied, the gesture automatic from childhood training she had thought buried, and turned to leave. She was almost at the door when his voice stopped her one more time. Ilara, whatever secrets you carry, whatever past you are running from, know this: I will protect you, even from yourself if necessary. That is what mates do. They protect each other, even when it is inconvenient, even when it is difficult, even when it might cost them everything. She did not turn around, did not trust herself to speak. She simply nodded once and left, feeling his eyes on her back every step of the way. The guest quarters were a revelation. After 5 years in a cramped servants' room, The spacious suite with its large bed, sitting area, and private bathing chamber felt almost obscenely luxurious. Alara stood in the center of the main room and slowly turned in a circle, taking in the fine furniture, the artwork on the walls, the view through tall windows that overlooked the palace gardens. This could be her life, she realized. This comfort, this safety, this legitimacy. All she had to do was trust Demon to keep his promises. All she had to do was risk her heart and her life on a mate bond she had not asked for, and had spent years training herself not to want. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find a young woman standing in the hallway, her arms full of fabric. "His Majesty sent me to help you prepare for tonight's meeting, if you choose to attend," the woman said with a polite curtsy. "I am Lyra, one of the palace seamstresses. I have several gowns that should fit you, and I can make any alterations needed." Alara stepped aside to let her enter, and within moments, the room was transformed into an impromptu dressing chamber as Lyra laid out gown after gown in rich jewel tones and elegant fabrics. "This one," Lyra said, holding up a dress in deep emerald green with silver embroidery. "This would be stunning with your coloring, and it sends the right message. Sophisticated but not ostentatious, confident but not arrogant, the right message." As if clothing could be a language, a statement of intent. But Alara supposed in the world of noble politics, that was exactly what it was. Every choice was a communication, every detail scrutinized for meaning. "Why are you helping?" "Me?" Alara asked, as Lyra began making small adjustments to the green gown. "You do not know me. For all you know, I could be a threat to the king or the kingdom." Lyra smiled, a knowing expression that made her look older than her years. "His Majesty gave very specific orders. You are to be treated as an honored guest and given every assistance. But more than that, I saw what happened in the ceremonial hall last night. I was in the servants' gallery helping with the ritual preparations. I saw the way he looked when he sensed you. I have worked in this palace for 15 years, Miss Alara. I have seen kings and queens and more political marriages than I can count, but I have never seen anyone look at another person the way King Demon looked toward you in that moment. That was not politics, that was not strategy, that was the mate bond in its purest form. And honestly, after everything this kingdom has been through, after all the war and loss and sacrifice, I think we could use a love story. I think we need one." The words struck something deep inside Alara, a longing she had been denying for so long that she had almost forgotten it existed. The desire not just to survive, but to actually live. To love and be loved, to have a place in the world that was hers by right, rather than by stealth and deception. But could she really have that? Could she really stand beside an alpha king as his queen when her very existence was built on lies, and her family name was synonymous with treason? "I do not know if I can be what he needs," Alara admitted quietly. "I do not know if I am strong enough for what he is offering." Lyra paused in her work and looked up at Alara with compassionate eyes. "Strength is not about knowing you can handle everything thrown at you. It is about choosing to face it anyway, even when you are terrified, even when you have every reason to run. You came here today, faced the king on your own terms, spoke truth even when it was dangerous. That took strength, Miss Alara. More strength than most nobles I know possess." She returned to adjusting the gown. "Now, let me finish these alterations, and you can decide if tonight is the night you choose to be brave again. But know this. Whatever you decide, there are people in this palace who are rooting for you, who want to see the Alpha King finally happy, who believe that sometimes the mate bond is not a burden but a blessing." Hours passed as Lyra worked, and as the sun began to set outside the tall windows, Alara found herself standing before a mirror in the completed emerald gown. The woman looking back at her was a stranger, and yet somehow familiar. Lyra had arranged her hair in an elegant style that framed her face, and the gown transformed her from a servant into someone who looked like they belonged in noble company. But it was more than the external changes. Something inside her had shifted as well. Some decision had been made in the deep places where words did not reach. She was tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of being afraid, and despite all logic, despite every reasonable concern and legitimate fear, she wanted to see where this impossible connection with Demon might lead. She wanted to know what it felt like to stop fighting against the mate bond and allow herself to feel its full force. She wanted, for the first time in 5 years, to hope. "I think," she said slowly, meeting Lyra's eyes in the mirror, "I think I am going to attend that meeting." Lyra smiled, bright and genuine. "I think that is a very wise choice, Miss Alara. Now come. It is nearly time, and a grand entrance is always more effective than a hesitant shuffle. She was right about that. When the guards opened the doors to the council chamber and announced Alara's arrival, every conversation in the room stopped, every head turned. And at the head of the long table, Alpha King Demon rose to his feet, his eyes locked on her with an intensity that stole breath and reason. "My lords," he said, his voice carrying easily through the stunned silence, "allow me to introduce Lady Alara Thorne, who will be joining us as my personal advisor in the coming weeks. She is under my direct protection and is to be afforded every courtesy due to her position. Personal advisor. Not mate, not intended queen, nothing that would immediately ignite the political firestorm that acknowledging the bond would create. But the message was clear to everyone in the room. She was important. She was protected. She was his. And judging by the expressions on the faces of the assembled nobles, that was going to be a problem for quite a few of them. Lady Seraphina sat 3 seats from the head of the table, her perfect face a mask of barely controlled fury. Her father, Lord Aldrich, glowered from across the room with undisguised hostility, and scattered among the others were faces Alara recognized from 5 years ago, nobles who had stood by and allowed her family to be destroyed, who had benefited from the redistribution of Shadow Moon lands and resources. This was dangerous. Far more dangerous than she had allowed herself to acknowledge. But as Demon pulled out the chair beside his own at the head of the table and gestured for her to sit, as the mate bond hummed with approval at their proximity, as she felt her wolf settle for the first time in years, Alara realized something important. Maybe danger was worth it. Maybe risk was the price of actually living. Maybe choosing love and hope over fear and survival was not foolishness, but the bravest thing a person could do. She sat down, folded her hands in her lap, and met the hostile gazes around the table with calm composure. "Thank you for allowing me to join your council," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I look forward to serving the kingdom in whatever capacity I can." The meeting began, voices rising in argument and accusation. Politics and power plays swirling through the air like storm winds. But through it all, she felt Demon's presence beside her, solid and unwavering. And she realized that for the first time since she was 15 years old, she did not feel alone. The road ahead would be difficult. There would be investigations and revelations and moments when the truth threatened to destroy everything. But sitting there beside her mate, feeling the bond strengthen with every passing moment, Alara made a promise to herself. She would not run anymore. She would not hide. She would face whatever came with courage and honesty and the fierce determination that came from finally having something worth fighting for. And maybe, just maybe, she would allow herself to believe that she deserved the happiness that true mate love could bring. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming?